Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long.
What happens when goodness and mercy don't seem to be following you? What happens when you're walking through the darkest valley and you're overcome with fear? Where are the green pastures? Psalm 23 feels a bit disorienting today. These questions made me think of a video I watched a couple weeks ago. The video was of a politician talking about his home city. He lived in a place under the poverty line, a place with many people living in difficult socioeconomic situations, with high crime rates, a place that had been overlooked and discarded by many. He was out one day when he heard gunshots. Running to the scene, he found a teenage boy with a gunshot wound, struggling to breathe. All he could do was hold the boy in his arms until the paramedics took him away. And even then, he knew their efforts would be in vain. That night, the man went home, filled with anger and darkness. He showered, trying relentlessly to scrub the blood off of his hands. Yet the water gave no comfort. The next morning, he went to the lobby of his building, and he saw the president of his tenants' association, a Miss Virginia Jones. He immediately remembered that her son had been killed in that very lobby 20 years previously, and she had never left. She intimately understood pain. Virginia had heard the events of the previous night, and she opened her arms, and the politician describes finally breaking down, weeping in her embrace. Virginia offered only two words of comfort. Stay faithful. Stay faithful. Not the kind of faith that says that nothing bad will ever happen, or that God won't let you see pain. Not the faith that says everything is okay, but rather the earthy faith of those who are intimately acquainted with the mess, the hurt, and the chaos of the world. The faith that has seen things and has experienced things and still chooses to be living and active even so. The politician continued his story to the attentive crowd and tied his experience into his civic duty to fight for the American people when all seemed lost, even when his community was overlooked by others, even when life seemed completely dark and goodness and mercy seemed miles away. And while this was about civic duty, I can't help but see how it connects with our spiritual life. Its interconnectedness with faith calls to a faith that has seen the darkest valley and yet finds comfort in the shepherd's staff. So maybe Psalm 23 is actually perfect for today. Psalm 23 welcomes the difficult questions. When I was younger, Psalm 23 always seemed calm, happy. Green pastures and still waters meant that God would fix the mess. My faith looks different than it did when I was younger. But some of the sentiments remain the same, just in different forms. Green pastures and still waters don't always mean that everything's okay, or that you are completely calm. Goodness and mercy can still exist in the anxious places. And I'd guess many of us are pretty familiar with the anxious places right now. We must still stay faithful. We must persist. Lent has never felt so real as it does today. We're plunged into the unknowns, perhaps the very definition of wilderness. Yet we have a shepherd who loves us, who promises to comfort us in the midst of the mess. The shepherd does not promise life without the darkest valleys, but rather promises to be with us in them. Our shepherd is here. He is here in the moments when we slam our books or our doors shut and we cry out our questions. She is here when we crave a real hug and can't have one. Here in the many FaceTime calls we make to stay connected to those we love. In the Zoom meetings, on the front lines of the hospitals, in the cars delivering groceries to those who can't leave home. In the quarantine, the hospital beds, our shepherd is here. Our shepherd who is as familiar with suffering as he is with joy. As we learn new ways to rely on each other, love each other, and help each other, let us remember that in these actions, our shepherd is here, loving us. I don't have answers. I don't imagine many of us do. But all I can say are Virginia Jones's words that have been ringing in my head for the past 2 weeks. Stay faithful. Stay faithful.